Marina Webster, your host for Inspiring Author TV. And today I am going to interview Harry Sprintz. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you very much.
Harry has written a book, House Adaptation. So, Harry, can you tell me about the book and why did you write it?
Well, I suppose the most obvious reason was that human knowledge and experience, if it isn't shared, it tends to be lost. That was the first and obvious requirement. But the other thing is doing a survey of what is available in the market in this kind of book, I found there was a remarkable lack of information about the stuff I wanted to talk about. There was plenty of books that were about do-it-yourself and you know, the DIY movement, as it's called, and I felt, well, that was okay. There's a market for that. But I wanted to talk about not so much doing it yourself, but giving people the intellectual tools to manage the process, as opposed to trying to do things themselves, as, in other words, becoming an amateur carpenter and an amateur plasterer or plumber. I think that's dangerous and rather fraught with difficulties. So, yeah, the motivation was to provide a book, although I have found in the short time that the book has been released that there's been quite a lot of interest from fellow architects and builders and developers, but actually the book wasn't written specifically for them. And more particularly, I wrote it for, what can I say, Mr. and Mrs. Average Householder, who are facing, well, I think it's a very big decision. What am I going to do with my house in the context of anything from extending the house for teenagers or looking after a much-loved dear old dad or mum, sometimes called a granny flat, but as a grandfather I resent the term, but I know what it means. However, I think the most important disability that I have to deal with, apart from trauma, which comes from obviously accidents, over which we may have no control, is simply aging. We are all aging. Actually, there's a wonderful word in the English language called vicarious, which means to collaborate, as we know. And I think what I'm trying to convey to people is instead of somebody taking over and making all their decisions for them, which is what I think some people feel an architect does, that they just said, oh, well, we'll design everything and you'll get what you're given. I don't think that's healthy or right or even fair or reasonable. What I'm really talking about in the book is how does a person with their most treasured possession, which is their home, feel in control when they're engaging in an adaptation or an expansion of their house. What will they get for their money? Will they be in control of that? And will they be a part of the decision-making process? And my book sets out in some degree of detail how this can happen. And as I say, the word vicarious fits in rather nicely because it indicates that if we all work together, but with one abiding quality between the three parties, architect, owner, builder, not necessarily in that order, is respect. We have to respect each other's wishes and respect each other's point of view. But ultimately, as the American actor Clint Eastwood once said, everyone should know their limitations, and unfortunately most people don't. They take on incredibly difficult jobs as a do-it-yourselfer, and then they get themselves into a terrible pickle, because quite apart from the fact that most people do not own the complicated equipment that tradesmen have, the second problem is, do they know how to use it safely?
So, Harry, can I just ask a question? So this book is for people who do not have experience in architect area?
That's right, they don't
just for normal people?
Yes, for people who want to, they have very strong ideas about how they want to live. And in fact, that's a very good point you raised, because I think the starting point is not to talk about design in the abstract, but to talk about lifestyle. So very often I often meet with clients and we go and have lunch or a cup of coffee or dinner, and we talk about their lifestyle in which they are the experts. And it's the architect's job to interpret that lifestyle and preferences together with a budget. But that raises a very interesting point about budgets. Very often the budget is not a budget really, it's a wish list. People say, I would like to only spend X amount of dollars. And that's fair enough, that may be all they can afford. But in no way could that be called a budget, because it's not measured against the realities of what you have to build or not build. So it starts off, I think, with what I call a person-to-person communication. Listening quietly and respectfully to each other's point of view. And the term we use in architecture in that relationship is called, as in legal practice, is called the brief. If there's a brief which acts as a guide, like a navigation aid, it says, well, hang on a minute, if we go off on a tangent outside of the brief, that's fine, but it will change the landscape of thinking. So that essentially, yes, it's to try to empower people with enough knowledge so that they are in control. The term I would use and have used in the book is not owner design, but owner directed work. And after all, the owner is the most important person, because it's their property, it's their life savings, and that should be respected by both the architect and the builder. But in order for that working relationship to work, you've got to, as they say in the movies, put your cards on the table and be totally honest with each other as to what you can afford, what you really want, what is really important, as opposed to trends, and fashion. That's a bit of a worry.
Okay, Harry, but how people can make decision about their house adaptation? Because all houses are different. Some houses are very big, some houses are small, and the area where the house is different. So how you can make decision, like in what way to adapt your house?
Well, actually, that again is a very interesting point of view, because not only are houses different and locations are different, people are different. In fact, disabilities are different. I've said it on many occasions that God does not make standard people, He doesn't make standard disabilities, and the technique and the skill is in recognising the differences. So, for instance, if you are building a house or extending it, and let's say in your mid-30s and you're busy, fit, active, and you start creating changes of level, you're creating barriers for the future. Later on, you'll have to spend a lot of money in overcoming those changes of level that you didn't need. For instance, if you want to have a two-storey house, or even a three-storey house, and you can't afford a lift, that's fine. Don't put one in, but arrange a space in the house where a lift can go later. And then instead of having to completely wreck the house to start again with a lift. And by the way, interesting point on lifts, which in this country have for many years been thought of as a luxury, but not in Europe. Everywhere in Europe you find lifts in houses, and in America of course. But a lift will cost you about the same as an average good quality motor car, about 45,000, fully installed. And
For three-story house.
Two-storey house.
Two-story house.
Yes. And the thing is that if you say, well, what if I don't have a lift and I just sell my house and move to a suburb? And it's got to be a suburb that you enjoy, that is convenient for your friends, your family, your shopping centre, movies, church, whatever. And then you suddenly find you can't find one like that because they're not available, or if you do, you can't afford it. And then you add on the real estate agent's charges, and of course stamp duty and legal costs, and guess what? You bought a lift. It's about the same cost as a lift. So there's a good argument for thinking about what the future might hold for you, and to plan for the inevitability of aging, because it will happen. The question is not if.
So what you're saying basically, that you decide to renovate your house when you're young, you have to think about the future, about how you're going to live in this house when you become old.
Well, that's right. And also, just one final point. It is always supposed that one day, when you are old or you pass away, you will leave your home to your children. This is the legacy.
Yes.
Now, if the legacy you leave your children is a house that doesn't work very well, and it's going to cost them an arm and a leg to adapt, then that's not a very good legacy. So it's worthwhile to think about what the next generation will inherit from you.
Inherit, yeah.
And bearing in mind that one of the problems we have in this otherwise perfect country is that the vast majority of houses are not, unfortunately, designed by registered architects with experience, and therefore there's a plethora of, shall we say, amateur architects around, and no surprise, therefore, we get some pretty poor housing. Not surprising.
Yeah. Okay, Harry, it sounds like very, very useful book to have, House Adaptation. Practical guidelines for informed choices in adapting or a family home for acceptable living and a home for life. So where people can buy your book?
Well, I've got it available through my website.
What is your website?
The website is www.harrysprintzarchitect.com. There's a link on the front page, and that takes you to a PayPal facility. And the book can be either bought in hardcover, or it can be bought as an e-book.
Okay.
The e-book is $27, and that's the end of that. And the hardcover is $39.50, including GSCs included. The only thing that's not included is postage.
Okay.
So unfortunately,
That's a very good price, yeah, for the book like that.
Well, I think so, because I know you are very experienced in this area, much more than I, in fact. But the hard work of a book that isn't popular fiction is research, and the research is what costs the time for which you normally don't get a return. But I'm sanguine about that.
Okay, thank you very much, Harry. It was very
Thank you very much.
my pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Sorry.